2 months ago to a Korean guy. Thank you. And I'm here to tell you about myself. When you hear the word diplomat, it's very hard to explain what a diplomat is or what diplomacy is. In a very simple terms, it's the alternative to war. So instead of taking weapons and fighting one another and to see who wins, there's always an alternative, and the alternative is to negotiate, to discuss, to talk. Right? Now, can you put on the presentation? Okay. Now, the title of my lecture today is Women and Diplomacy. And the message that I would like to pass on is speak up. But this message is not correct only for women or girls. It's correct for also boys. It's correct for everyone. Most of the characters or the personas that will appear on this presentation are women. But that's only because I am a woman. And the best tool for a diplomat is himself or herself. You about diplomacy from my point of view, because I think the personal story is much more effective than talking about the theory. According to this person, diplomacy is this, according to that person. And diplomacy is actually making a change. So I will tell you from my point of view how I got to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and how I try to make a change through who I am. Right. All right, but let's begin. So I picked a few women personas that are very strong women and that they have made change in the world. So here's Condoleezza Rice. She's the first African-American woman to be the US Secretary of State. Secretary of State means the Minister of Foreign Affairs, basically, okay? And she says, I think the truth of the matter is people who end up as first don't actually set out to be first. They set out to do something they love, and it just so happens that they are the first to do it. Can you think of a Korean woman who is the first? Who? Okay, raise your hand, that would be better. It's not on the test, it's not a test. Yeah, sure. First woman? Lawyer. Oh, I didn't know that. Really? I was thinking of someone else. But that's really nice. Any other women that you know? Any other? Yeah. Oh, a boy. Nice.
Lee So-yeon, she was not only the first female South Korean astronaut, but also the first astronaut in South Korea.
Bingo. That's true. So do you think Lee So-yeon, she was thinking, I will be the first astronaut? I don't think so. She did something that she loved, and eventually she became the first woman astronaut of South Korea. And if you ask her, and I've been to some of her lectures, if you ask her, she's not someone who is promoting more women in space only, but she's promoting more men to support women in space. Okay? So I do talk about women, but I do want to mention that in order for a woman to reach a certain place, someone needs to, let me give you an example. If there is a row, and all the row is filled with chairs, and on the chairs there are only boys, the option of having a woman there is perhaps someone taking initiative and adding a chair, right? Then there would be a woman there. Can we, oh, thank you. Was I going to steal your clicker? Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about who I am and why I started to talk about the first. So I happen to be the first Muslim woman to represent Israel in its 72 years of existence. Right? So it's something that happened as a result of many occasions and many interactions. And the situation in Israel is very complicated. So let me talk to you about Israel for a little bit. A lot of people think that Israel means Jews or Jewish people. But the truth of the matter is that 20% of Israel's population are Arabs. Arabs are, of course, citizens of Israel, whose first language is Arabic. So I do speak Arabic. Does anyone speak Arabic? You speak Arabic? No. Okay. So I speak Arabic. I speak Hebrew. Hebrew is the official language of Israel. And of course, English. It helps me communicate with you. The first official language of Israel is the Hebrew, because the majority are Jewish people. The second official language of Israel is Arabic, because of that 20% that are non-Jews. Now, amongst the Arab community, there are Muslims and there are Christians. Okay. You probably heard maybe your grandparents or your parents, maybe they visited Israel or they spoke about visiting Israel to visit the Holy Land. Right? Where was Jesus born? Yeah, in Israel. Where? Bethlehem, right. But actually, that's a tricky point, because Bethlehem is not technically in Israel. At the beginning, there was the Ottoman Empire. There's a little bit of history. And then the Ottoman Empire started to fall down, and the area became under the British mandate. And with diplomacy, the area was divided, right? And then Israel was established or born. But when Israel was established, there were already populations there, an Arab population. But there was an importance to the existence of the State of Israel. Have you heard about the Second World War? Of course you did. Have you heard about the Holocaust? Yeah. So 6 million Jews were perished during the Holocaust. under Hitler's reign. And it was very important for the Jewish communities around the world to have a safe haven, a country that they can call home, a country that they can escape to if they have to, because they were under threat abroad. So Israel became the first and the only Jewish country in the world. Let me give you an example from recent incidents. If you follow the news, you probably heard about the war between Russia and Ukraine, right? So the Jewish communities were threatened. But for the Ukrainians and the Russians that did not feel safe abroad, they had a home to return to. And indeed, thousands of Ukrainians and thousands of Russians actually came to Israel. And that's the best example that I can give you of why Israel exists. Now, Israel is surrounded by Arab countries. And some countries, they think that perhaps Israel shouldn't be in that area, but it was actually decided by the United Nations. And therefore, Israel exists with the majority of Jewish people, minority of Arab people. However, there's a conflict in the Middle East. There are two conflicts. One is called the Israel-Arab conflict, because Israel is the only Jewish country surrounded by Arab countries. And the second, the most important one, is called the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Okay? These conflicts are being resolved as we speak. Unlike in war, which is sadly another, I will repeat the example between Russia and Ukraine, many people have died. But it seems like there's no resolution other than actually sitting around the table and solving the problem. 2 years ago, Israel made a huge leap. Israel didn't have diplomatic relations with some of the Middle Eastern countries because of these conflicts. But 2 years ago, Israel established diplomatic relations with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco. Okay? These are Arab countries that took a side, and that side was the Arab side or the Palestinian side. But then eventually, through diplomacy, we called this whole package Abraham Accords. So through diplomacy, people were able to establish relations with a state that was seen through a very narrow window. And that narrow window said, it's a Jewish state, it's a threat to the Arab world, we will not have relations with Israel. But according to diplomacy, if you have common interests, then you can be friends. It's like in Korea, right? If you are on the same age as the other person, then you can be friends, right? So, and that's what happened. This is really like just, I'm touching on a few points about Israel. It has a really rich history, but I also see people like kind of nodding off. I don't know, maybe because it's the snow and the cold weather, but let's, it's okay. But let's move on to a more controversial topic, because controversy tends to wake people up, right? So who am I? As an Arab citizen in Israel, I can say that my grandparents were Palestinian. But after the establishment of Israel, my family was all of a sudden in the territory of Israel, and they were given Israeli passports and Israeli IDs. And then if you think about my grandparents, they lived their whole lives as a certain nation, as Palestinians. But then all of a sudden you wake up and you have a different nationality. Let me give you an example, right? A theoretical exercise. Let's say that you're South Korean, right? And you wake up the next day with a Chinese passport. That's a bit shocking, isn't it? Yeah. So my grandparents had this conflict. And then this conflict was inherited by my parents. But with the different generations, conflicts seem to be a bit on the resolution side. Like they tend to be less severe because people adapt. And generation by generation, they adapt to the situation. So in my case, my conflict, my inner conflict was, okay, I'm an Arab. My first language is Arabic. But I have an Israeli passport. My grandparents were Palestinian, and I grew up in Palestinian culture. So who am I? Am I Palestinian or Israeli? What do you think? It's a hard question, right? It really was a hard question, and it took me many, many years to resolve this question until I reached to the conclusion that I am the person that gets to identify myself. Okay? There are some facts that exist. There's the majority of Jewish people. I belong to the minority. And the majority always feels that they're more privileged. So as a minority, I felt underprivileged. But then I realized it was my choice. As an Israeli citizen, I should be as privileged as a Jewish person who's in the majority. But then I asked myself, am I asking for my privileges? And that was the switch in my thinking. I said to myself, maybe I should enter the government sector and make my point. So I don't like to, Israel and the politics in Israel is a very gray area, so I don't like to use black and white to identify where I am or who I am or where I came from. And I think that as a diplomat, it's best to reflect Israel as it is. Because it's a gray area. You will hear some days good things about Israel, some days you will hear maybe bad things about Israel. But I want you to know that it's much more complicated than that. And in Israel, there are many communities. Some of the Jewish people, they came from Spain, some from Germany or other European countries, and some from the Middle East. And Israel has a very unique approach towards these communities. Since they're all Jews, right? It was very important to also protect the culture that they came from. So you can walk in the street in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem, and you can hear Spanish, you can hear Russian, you can hear Arabic, and many languages. You can hear even German. So Israel is a mosaic. It's like this beautiful window with small, colorful fractures in it. And when you look at Israel, it's not a blank wall. It's actually something that has depth and has culture and has history. So from my point of view, from where I stand, I would like to represent my small fracture of this beautiful mosaic. So, as I told you, I see myself as a human, as a woman, as an Arab, and as a Muslim. And I don't think any of those characteristics conflict with the fact that I'm also Israeli. Okay. This is Kim Campbell, the first woman Prime Minister of Canada. She says, if you never encounter anything in your community that offends you, then you are not living in a free society. So the fact that I questioned my position in the Israeli society, it means that I actually live in a free society. Because I could move from point A to point B with absolutely free will. So even though the majority is Jewish people, Israel is considered as the only democratic country in the Middle East. And as any democracy, you need to give people the opportunity to speak their mind and to have free will. Right. I don't want to waste time on this, but I will make it very short. I was working at the parliament, and I encountered a group of people from Belgium, and there was an Israeli diplomat with them. I gave them a tour of the parliament, and then the Israeli diplomat, she asked me, well, have you considered ever becoming an Israeli diplomat? And my first reaction was, can Arabs do that? And her answer actually changed my life. Because if my window of opportunity was this big, all of a sudden she made it like a huge window. And it changed my perspective. So I decided to take initiative and actually become a diplomat. And I think it turned out to be very suitable for me. I think this is the job that I cannot imagine doing anything else. All right. Do you know her? Queen. You only know Queen Elizabeth? May she rest in peace. Okay. So she's the Queen Rania of Jordan. She says, whatever title or office we may be privileged to hold, it is what we do that defines who we are. Each of us must decide what kind of person we want to be, what kind of legacy that we want to pass on. Okay. So I decided to be a very complicated person, because that's how complicated Israel society is, in a good way, and sometimes in a less good way. And me being here and talking to you about it, this is how I'm passing this on. As I mentioned, the Arab community in Israel is 20%, and sometimes uniqueness isn't something that's necessarily bad. Sometimes actually something that's like a gift that can show other people, or a gift that can connect a certain group of people to the whole world. So I think when I first came here, the thought about Israel was that Israel was a Jewish country. But I bet that if someone asks you, are there Arabs in Israel, I think you would know the answer, right? Are you sleeping? Okay. Golda Meir, she's the first prime minister of Israel. Trust yourself, create the kind of self that you will be happy to live with all your life. So what other self can you be happier living than your true self? And you are at the age of a key point of your lives. This is when you actually start. This is not when you decide finally, but that's when you start to think about who you are and who you want to be, and what are the tools that you have, and what kind of change you want to see in your own society. Women around a table of men. Sheryl Sandberg, she used to be one of the founders of Facebook. She left after, but she wrote a book that's called Lean In. She says that from her experience, she noticed that women around the table tend to lean back and not forward, while men actually lean forward because they have the intention to speak and the intention to be present. So in her book, Lean In, she's trying to convince women she's trying to convince women that they actually have a choice. They have a choice of participating and being active, or just being passive. So it's not everything in gender equality. Not everything is related to men and their relations towards men. Sometimes it's the woman that has to be more confident and to decide to lean in and participate and partake in something that's bigger. Right. Madeleine Albright, she was the first woman US Secretary of State. She says, "It took me quite a long time to develop a voice, and now that I have it, I am not going to be silent." Okay. I will not stay on this slide for too long. The message is that you do need to speak up if you have an opinion. So if you noticed, I know it's a cultural difference, but throughout the lecture, I asked you several times about your opinion. But a lot of people were too shy to share. But I also understand that it's a cultural phenomena. So if you go to Israel and they ask you about your opinion, feel free to say your opinion. And it doesn't have to be something good, okay? It can be criticism, but it can also be something good, right? And don't be afraid to speak up your opinion, because you're the only person, you're the only you in the world. Okay. Voice of a woman. In the global village, women's voices often go unheard. So, do you know what a global village is? See, the entire world became a global village, and village is smaller than a city because of internet and social networks. Right? We can read about Africa, right? We can read about China, about the Middle East. We can read about anything that we want to, and we can actually start to communicate and make a connection with someone, even though they are like thousands of kilometers away. So I want you to think outside of the box. I don't want you to think about women as, oh, well, the women in Korea are okay, it's a democratic society. But you also need to consider the women outside of Korea, maybe women in Middle Eastern countries. For example, in Saudi Arabia, women were not allowed to drive a car. But here, it's nonsense. It's something that, of course, you can drive a car. But only 2 years ago, it was permitted. Okay? So that's one example. There are many other examples of underprivileged women, especially perhaps in African countries or Eastern European countries. Now, okay, this is something that I didn't mean to include in the lecture, but maybe it can help. A lot of people see in Israel as a very successful country, and in Jewish people as very talented ethnic group. And they ask, what's so special about being Jewish? why are you guys so successful? First of all, not all Jewish people are successful. But second of all, there's something that's called collective memory. And in Jewish society, the memory of the Holocaust and the pain that the Jewish community has endured actually left a scar. And the Jewish ethnic group, they said, well, I can have a land, but this land could be taken from me. I can have this chair, but it can be taken from me. I can have, a farm, but it could be taken away from me because of who I am. So they invested in something else. They invested in something that cannot be taken away. And that's intellect, knowledge. Okay? So you can be in any economic situation on earth. I can tell you from me, like just between you and me, don't tell anyone. I came from a very, a bit of a poor family. But I invested in my education because I didn't have anything else. And I went to the university, and I became the first woman in my family to go to a university and wanting to have a higher education. And then I became the first woman in Israel, a Muslim of Muslim background, to become a diplomat. So do invest. It doesn't matter how much you have. It doesn't matter what kind of tools you have. There is one thing that you can always enrich, and you will get a great benefit out of it, and that's your brain, right? Your intellect. Right. So responsibility towards one another. The reason that I asked you to look around, which was very interesting, you said that there are more girls than boys here. But I was told that there are more boys than girls. Maybe there's a reason that you saw more women than, more girls, not women, more girls than boys. But what I want to tell you is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if only 20% of you are girls and or 20% of you are boys. You are partners. You're partners in life, and you should help one another to succeed. Okay. Gender doesn't really play a role in who, or should not, should not play a role in defining your destination in this life. So women are 50% of the population. And it's only logical that women would have 50% of the jobs, right, or the positions in the world. But that's not the situation. And I don't think there is to blame a certain gender, to say, well, the men are not allowing us, or the boys in the class are not allowing us. I think that everyone should have their own responsibility, and to try and break the glass ceiling. You know that term, glass ceiling? It's when you look up and there is glass ceiling. You can see through it. You can see that, I can be the CEO of this huge company, but then when you get to the ceiling, it's blocking you, but you can see what you can be. So what I want to tell you is, if you can see it, then you can become it. Okay? Just bring a hammer and then break the glass ceiling. Okay, emotional intelligence. Okay, I think we're running out of time. And I really want to hear your questions. Okay, so the second point, women should not be present just for quota. They should be given a space it got cut. They should be given a space to speak and to say their own opinion. Okay. People need to see that women can do the jobs, which leads to culture change and is imperative for growth in gender equality around the table. To be honest, I read last week that for the first time, was it the president of Samsung? Like a very high position in Samsung company, for the first time, it was a woman. And I was thinking to myself, well, yeah, it's like great job for her. But I was thinking, what a great model for other girls in the Korean society. So whatever you do, when you do break this glass ceiling, you're not doing it only for yourself, you're also doing it for the others. And I think it's your own responsibility to help the others to also break their own glass ceiling. Okay. I love this quote. It's said by Margaret Thatcher, first woman Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. That's something that's very it's very serious, and she was a very strong woman. So her idea is that men perhaps are very good at talking, they're very good at negotiating perhaps, but women tend to also follow through with actions. So of course her opinion is not objective. It's a bit biased, but I kind of like it. I think that we should all remember that if we say something, if we put our mind on a certain goal, we should reach that goal. If I want to help and support others, then I should do something about that, and not just keep it in my mind. And that goes equally for both girls and boys. All right. Okay. So thank you. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here.
So now, shall we continue with Q&A?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. All right. So first question.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So I would like to ask you a question about, since there are lots of conflicts that are happening around the world and you are acting as a diplomat to solve them, what are some things that we as middle school students can do to solve those conflicts?
It's a great question. I think I think conflicts are complicated, and we shouldn't think about them as well. I can go negotiate, and there's a good answer, or there's a right answer, and there's a bad answer. The best way to go around a conflict, well, I skipped that slide, emotional intelligence. The best way to go around the conflict is to try and put yourself in the other person's shoes, to acknowledge that not only you have interests, but also the other person have interests. Not only you have certain fears, but also the other person has fears. So in the case of Israel and the Palestinian Authority, it's very hard to bring two people who fought on the table and just say, okay, now you resolve everything together, right? Because although Israel tried many times to bring the Palestinians to the negotiation table, the Palestinians decided maybe it's right, maybe it's not. I'm not in their shoes. I live in Israel. I'm not in their shoes to decide for them. But they decided that they have the upper hand if they do not come to the negotiation table. okay? And that's true in some ways. I assume that you're talking about maybe North and South Korea. So a negotiation happens if the two sides are open to this negotiation. I would say that the best tool that you can have and that you can prepare as a middle school is to work on your interpersonal skills. Okay?
Thank you.
It's like the nunchi. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Next question. Raise your hand, please.
Hello. Can I ask you a question?
No, of course you
Okay.
can.
Okay, so I'm personally thinking of becoming a diplomat myself. So I would like to ask your most memorable thing you have done as a diplomat, or maybe not most memorable, but the most important thing, I guess.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. When you work as a diplomat, you don't work as an individual. You work as a unit. So the question should be, I think, what's the most important thing that the Embassy of Israel have done? Okay? So I think in recent years, the most important thing that the embassy have done was to actually promote the signing of the free trade agreement between Korea and Israel. It's the first free trade agreement of Korea with a Middle Eastern country. Think about it, how mind-blowing it is. It's the first one with a Middle Eastern country, and it's not an Arab country, it's a Jewish country. And it's the first one that Israel has with Asia. So having certain agreements, there are also cultural agreements between countries, and education agreements, and agricultural agreements. This is how you bring the people together. And I emphasize people and not governments, because governments change. But people, they remember a certain story about this other nation. And I can tell you that Korea is very famous in Israel. Both K-drama, BTS, I know they're going to the army now, but a lot of people, they started to learn Korean, and by this, getting closer to Korea. So what we were trying to do is to add another bond between Israel and Korea, and that's trade. It's an economic bond. So our job as diplomats is to increase the number of these bonds as much as possible to bring the two nations closer together.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
So you said you're the first woman in your family to go to college and highly educated, and also the first women diplomat in your country. And according to your lecture, you said you had to break many, many layers of glass ceiling. And what was hammer in your case?
What was?
What was your hammer in
My
your
hammer?
case?
Oh, that's a very good question. My hammer, and people tell me that I have very strong will. So I think if you have the willingness, and as I said, if you can see through this glass ceiling, then you can become whatever you want to be. The only person who's allowed to say no to you is yourself. If you say no to yourself, then you only stop yourself. But if you say that you can do it, as a diplomat, I can tell you there are many, many, many ways to reach a certain point. And there's not just one path. Either it's open or closed. You can find your own way if you have the will. Yeah.
Okay.
So previously you've told us that due to the Russian-Ukrainian war, a lot of Russians and Ukrainians have fled to Israel. What impacts does that have on Israel specifically, and does it bring profit to Israel?
Well, the idea is not about profit. It's about as I said, the collective memory, okay? There are Jewish people all around the world. They're not only in Israel. And there are also Jewish communities all around the world. Israel was one of the first countries to actually open a gate to receive refugees from Ukraine. And not all of them are Jewish. There were also some Christians. But Israel used diplomacy by negotiating with the Russian government and also the Ukrainian government for our embassies to be present there and open the door for Jewish community and whoever also wants to leave the area of conflict to go to Israel. And to be honest, I think it's not comfortable to be a refugee. You always want to go back to your own country and your own family and your familiar friends and schools, right? So it's something that doesn't have to do with profit at this point, because at times of war, what you think about is survival. So what Israel is doing is something that's beyond any tangible effect. It's something that only strengthens the bond between the state of Israel and the Jewish communities around the world.
Thank you.
Yeah,
My question is that still, though the severeness decreased between the conflict of Israel's Jewish powers and Palestine conflict, there are still conflicts, but my question is that why does most of the countries still, most of the southern countries support Israel? Yeah.
most of the countries support Israel.
Yeah. Why did I?
Oh,
say-
I wish that was true. It's actually the opposite. At the United Nations, most of the countries are actually, think about it this way. There's only one Jewish country and about 21 Arab countries, okay? So it's like having one diplomat and 21 diplomats. And at the United Nations, it comes down to negotiation between the countries. And if the certain European country is doing something or voting a certain way, then other countries would do the same. But your question is very accurate and it's very correct to ask, right? Because at the end of the day, right, Israel and the Palestinian Authority, right, they need to reach a resolution regardless of how the other countries look at it. And I can tell you that I think today we are more close to a resolution than we were before, because the Middle East is changing. It's changing by actually creating diplomatic relations with Middle Eastern countries that 2 years ago it was something that's impossible to do, but it was proven to be possible. So with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, now we have actually embassies that represent Israel. I think that's actually like 20% of solving the problem, because these previously non-friendly countries, they can help Israel to mediate with the Palestinians. So the more friends that you have in common, the more educated you become, and the more help you have in resolving a conflict.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, guys, I think we have time for one question. So last question.
So do you believe that applying quotas, making 50% of the board of directors women or like things like that will be able to solve gender inequality?
As I said, women are not pieces of chess that you just put on a table and then it solves everything. The women, you know what feminism means? It's a very confused word in Korea, but feminism means having the same rights given to both women and men. So if women are 50% of the board members, then they need to have 50% of the ideas presented. And they need to have 50% of the opportunity to do something, not just to be there as a toy. Okay?
Okay, guys, so that's going to go ahead and wrap up our time with the Deputy Chief this morning. Let's give one more hand for our guest this morning.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be here and a pleasure to be given the opportunity to speak to you. Because I really do believe that all of you are gifted and that you have your whole life ahead of you. And it's an honor for me to be here and to give you like a little bit perspective of something that is different, something better along the way. And I hope you continue your education and you also reach universities and you become CEOs of Samsung or LG or SK or any other country that you want. Okay. Thank you so much.
So thank you again for your time and coming all the way here in the cold. So for the rest of you guys, the students, we will be having break time from now till 11:10. But before you guys move from your seats, do not touch any of the balloons or the Christmas decorations here. Okay, they should not be touched. They should be intact. So for the rest of you guys, from 10:50 to 11:10, you'll be having break time, and then we'll be starting the next event, Daewon Global Quiz Show, from 11:10 to 11:50. And so we need to have the following students before you leave. Okay, from 101, 홍준수, 허지윤, 이서하, 안준우, 권도현, 이나율, 황승재, 김지원, 정승민, 박주성. And from second grade, okay, 류담, guys listen, okay, 류담, 임기범, 김하준, 박지훈, 김판주, 백성현, 조진우, 박준서 A, 4반에서 있는 박준서, 최비주, 김태환. 3학년에선 from third grade, 고성빈, 홍성준, 한승주, 조유환, 조형준, 고준형, 한채윤, 고인소, 손예서, 홍성관. 자, 앞으로 오세요. 자, 무대 위로 오세요. 다른 친구들은 쉬는 시간 가지세요. 자, come on up. 모이세요. 자, 얘들 풍선 절대 건드리지 마세요. 풍선 건드리시면 안 됩니다. 모의 면접? 여기 모이세요. 자, 이름 불렀던 친구도 여기 모이세요. 여기로 모이세요. 여기로 오세요. 여기로 오시면 되겠다. 와, 자, 여러분이 당첨됐어요. 자, 앞에 무대에서 퀴즈를 맞출 분들로 지정이 됐는데